I'm Hazel, 26 years old, and I thought saying no to family would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. I still remember the day I got the keys to my first apartment. Standing in that empty space knowing it was mine felt like everything I'd worked for had finally paid off. I believed my family would respect that this was my sanctuary, my achievement. Until my younger sister announced she'd be moving in with me for college. Not asked. Announced. Like it was already decided. When I said no, my entire family turned against me. My parents called me selfish. My relatives stopped talking to me. But nobody asked why I needed to protect this space so badly. Nobody knew what I'd sacrificed to get here. Before I tell you how this unfolded, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever been called selfish for protecting your boundaries, hit that like button because you'll understand every word of this. And subscribe because what happened next taught me the most valuable lesson about family and self-worth. Let me take you back to where this all started. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and family is supposed to mean everything. My dad worked at the local bank, steady and reliable. My mom taught third grade at the elementary school I'd attended years before. And then there was Sophie, my little sister, 10 years younger than me. When Sophie was born, I was already 10 years old enough to help change diapers, old enough to babysit, old enough to be told I needed to be the responsible one. My parents called Sophie their miracle baby, their unexpected blessing. And they poured everything into her, every dream, every hope, every dollar they could spare. I understood it at the time, or at least I told myself I did. She was the baby. She needed more attention. But looking back now, I can see how that dynamic shaped everything that came after. By the time I was ready for college, I'd learned to be self-sufficient. I had to be. When I got accepted to the University of Colorado Boulder, I was thrilled. It was far enough from home to feel like freedom, but close enough that I could visit if needed. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table one evening in late spring. I remember the way my dad folded his hands together, the way my mom wouldn't quite meet my eyes. They told me they could help with some of my college costs, but not all of it. Maybe not even most of it. They needed to save for Sophie's future, they explained. She was only 7 then, but they wanted to be prepared. I understood. At least I said I understood. What choice did I have? So I applied for every scholarship I could find. I worked 3 part-time jobs that first year. Morning shifts at a coffee shop near campus, afternoons at the library, evenings tutoring students in subjects I was good at. I lived in a cramped dormitory with 3 other girls, our beds practically touching, no privacy, no quiet space to think. I watched my roommates get care packages from home, watched them go out on weekends while I picked up extra shifts. I graduated with honors 4 years later, my student loans manageable because I'd worked myself to exhaustion to keep them low. My parents didn't make it to my graduation ceremony. It was too far to drive, they said. Sophie had a dance recital that same weekend. She was only 11. They couldn't miss it. I told them it was fine. I smiled in my cap and gown, took photos with friends, and pretended the empty seats in the audience didn't hurt. After graduation, I moved to Denver. I'd gotten a job offer as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm. The salary wasn't huge, but it was more money than I'd ever made. I found a tiny studio apartment, furnished it with pieces from Craigslist and hand-me-downs from coworkers. That studio was barely 400 square feet, but it was mine. Every morning I woke up and remembered that nobody could tell me what to do in my own space. I worked hard. I stayed late when projects needed finishing. I volunteered for the difficult clients. 3 years later, I was promoted to marketing manager. My salary jumped to $65,000 a year. For the first time in my life, I had breathing room financially. I started saving aggressively, putting away every dollar I could spare. I had a goal. I wanted to buy my own place. It took 2 more years of saving, of living frugally, of saying no to vacations and expensive dinners out. But last August, I signed the papers on a 1-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood just 15 minutes from my office. 650 square feet of space that belonged to me. Not rented, not borrowed. Mine. The mortgage was steep, but I could manage it. I had a real bedroom with a door that closed, a kitchen where I could cook without someone else's schedule dictating when I could use the stove, a living room with a couch I'd saved 3 months to buy navy blue and perfectly comfortable. I spent weeks making that apartment exactly what I wanted. I hung artwork I'd chosen myself. I painted an accent wall in the bedroom, a soft gray that made me feel calm. I set up a workspace by the window where I could see the city lights at night. Every item in that apartment represented something I'd earned. For the first time in my 26 years, I felt like I'd built something that was entirely my own. Something nobody could take away. Or so I thought. The call came on a Tuesday evening in April. I was sitting on my couch, laptop open, finishing up some work emails. My phone lit up with a video call from my parents. Sophie's face filled the screen alongside theirs, all three of them beaming with excitement. Before I could even say hello properly, Sophie blurted it out. She'd been accepted to the University of Denver, the same city where I lived, just 4 miles from my apartment. My parents were talking over each other, their voices filled with pride. Sophie had worked so hard, they said. She'd gotten great grades. This was a wonderful opportunity. I felt genuinely happy for her. Denver was a great city for college. The university had good programs. I opened my mouth to congratulate her, to tell her how exciting this was. But then Sophie said something that made my stomach drop. I know, and I get to live with you. She said it with such casual certainty, like it had already been decided, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I blinked at the screen, confused. What do you mean? I asked carefully. My mom jumped in, her voice bright and practical. Well, obviously Sophie will stay at your place, she said. It makes perfect sense. My dad was already pulling up a calculator on his phone, showing me numbers I hadn't asked to see. Housing on campus costs $18,000 a year, he explained. But Sophie can live with you for free. We'll save so much money. The way he said it, like it was a done deal, like my opinion was just a formality. I tried to keep my voice calm. But my apartment is only 1 bedroom, I said. Sophie waved her hand dismissively. That's okay, she chirped. I can sleep on the couch, or we can share your bed like when I was little. Remember how we used to have sleepovers? I stared at her through the screen. Sophie, you were 5 back then, I said slowly. She'd be 17 by the time she started college in the fall, nearly an adult. The idea of sharing my queen-size bed with a teenager made me want to laugh if it wasn't so absurd. My dad's voice cut through my thoughts. Don't be dramatic, Hazel, he said. Plenty of siblings lived together during college. Your mother's cousin did it for 3 years. I wanted to point out that I wasn't being dramatic, that I was being realistic, but my mom was already talking again. You have a whole apartment to yourself, she said. There's definitely room. And Sophie won't be any trouble. She's very mature for her age. I felt the walls of my apartment suddenly feel smaller, like they were already being invaded. I need to think about this, I said, trying to buy time. Sophie's face fell immediately. She looked genuinely hurt. I thought you'd be excited, she said softly. Don't you want to spend time with me? The guilt hit me like a wave, exactly as it was intended to. But I held firm. I just need to think about it, I repeated. We can talk about this later. After we hung up, I sat in silence, looking around my apartment. My safe space. My achievement. I thought about what it would mean to have Sophie here. She was 16, about to be 17. Still in high school, though, just barely. I remembered what I was like at that age. Social, loud, always wanting friends around. I thought about my work from home schedule, 2 days a week at my dining table that doubled as my desk. I needed quiet for video calls with clients. I needed focus. I thought about the dormitory I'd lived in during my freshman year. 4 girls crammed into a space meant for 2. The constant noise, the lack of privacy, the feeling of never being able to just exist without someone else's schedule affecting mine. I'd hated every minute of it, and I'd gotten through it by telling myself that someday I'd have my own space. This apartment was that someday. But more than the practical concerns, something else bothered me. The assumption, the expectation that of course I would say yes. That my space, my home, my life was automatically available for family use. Nobody had asked if it was okay. They'd simply decided. And I realized that if I didn't stand up for myself now, this pattern would continue forever. I made my decision that night. It wasn't easy. It went against everything I'd been taught about family, about sacrifice, about being a good older sister. But I knew deep in my bones that saying yes would be a mistake I'd regret for years. So the next evening, I called my parents back. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, tried to keep it simple and clear. I waited for them to answer my heart pounding. When their faces appeared on screen, I didn't waste time. "I've thought about it," I said, my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. "And I can't have Sophie live with me." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I watched my mother's expression shift from confused to shocked to something harder. "What did you just say?" she asked quietly. I repeated myself slower this time. "My apartment is too small. I work from home. I need my own space." My dad's face was turning red. "Your own space," he said, his voice rising. "You have an entire apartment." I tried to explain. "It's a one-bedroom, Dad. 650 square feet. There's barely room for me." But he wasn't listening. "Sophie is your sister," my mom cut in. "Family helps family. That's what we do." I understand that, I said, trying to stay calm. "But this is my home. I worked really hard to afford it." Then Sophie grabbed the phone from my mom's hands. Her eyes were already filling with tears. "So you're saying you don't want me there?" she said, her voice breaking. "You hate me." The accusation stung. "Sophie, I don't hate you," I said firmly. "I just need my independence." But she was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe you're being so selfish," she sobbed. My dad took the phone back. "Hazel," he said, and his voice had gone cold in a way I'd never heard before. "We are very disappointed in you." And then he ended the call. I sat there staring at my blank phone screen, my apartment suddenly feeling too quiet, too empty. I'd stood my ground, but the cost was already starting to show itself. The phone calls started the very next day. My mom called first, her voice tight with forced patience. "Hazel, please reconsider," she said without even saying hello first. "Sophie is heartbroken. She's been crying all night." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, taking a breath. "I'm sorry she's upset," I said carefully. But my answer hasn't changed. My mom's patience evaporated. "Do you know how much we spent on your college?" she snapped. "We helped you. And now we're asking for one small favor and you can't even do that." I felt my own frustration rising. "You didn't spend that much," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I paid for most of it myself. Remember, 3 jobs, student loans, scholarships." "That's not the point," my dad's voice joined in. I realized he was on speakerphone. "The point is that family should help each other. You had your independence. You had your time to be alone. Now it's your turn to help your sister." "But I am helping," I insisted. "I can help find affordable housing near campus. I can research options. There are lots of good dorms." My mom made a sound of disgust. "We don't want affordable housing," she said. "We want free housing. With you." The bluntness of it caught me off guard. "So this is about money," I said slowly. "Of course it's about money," my dad shot back. "Do you know how expensive college is? We're trying to be smart about this. And you're being selfish." That word again. Selfish. Like wanting to keep my own home to myself was some kind of moral failing. The calls continued for 3 days straight. Sometimes both parents, sometimes just one of them. Each conversation was a variation of the same theme. I was being unreasonable. I was being difficult. I was forgetting where I came from. By the 3rd day, I stopped answering. I'd send them to voicemail and listen later, my stomach churning with guilt and anger in equal measure. Then my extended family got involved. My Aunt Carolyn called on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of a work meeting and had to step away to take the call, thinking maybe it was urgent. "Hazel, honey," she said in that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something. Your mom told me what's happening. I think you're being unreasonable. I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall of my apartment building's hallway. When I was your age, Aunt Carolyn continued, I let my sister stay with me for 2 years. 2 whole years. And yes, it was hard sometimes, but that's what family does. That was your choice, I said quietly. Exactly, she agreed, misunderstanding my point entirely. And you need to make the right choice too. Sophie is family. You're making your parents struggle financially. I wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this situation was different, but I was so tired. My Uncle James called that evening. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Your dad is stressed about these college costs, he said bluntly. You could help, but you're choosing not to. What kind of sister are you? The accusation hung in the air. I didn't have an answer that would satisfy him. So I said nothing, and eventually he hung up, disgusted by my silence. But the worst part wasn't the phone calls. It was the social media posts. My mom, who usually only posted pictures of her garden and inspirational quotes, suddenly started posting vague but pointed messages. Some people forget where they came from, one post read. Family should always come first. Praying for those who've lost their way. The comments section filled up quickly. Friends and relatives asking what was wrong, offering support. My mom would reply vaguely, just dealing with family disappointment. Some children grow up and forget their roots. I saw the posts because mutual friends started messaging me. Is everything okay? What's going on with your family? I didn't know what to say. How do you explain this situation in a Facebook message? So I said nothing, which probably made me look guilty. Then Sophie joined in. She posted an old photo of us from when she was about 7 and I was 17. We were at a park, Sophie on my shoulders, both of us laughing at something off camera. The caption read, Miss when my sister actually cared about me. The comments poured in. People I barely knew offering Sophie sympathy, telling her she deserved better. Some even tagging me asking what happened. I felt exposed, like I was being publicly shamed for a crime I didn't commit. But I refused to defend myself on social media. That wasn't the battleground I wanted to fight on. So I muted the notifications and tried to pretend I didn't care. But I did care. Of course I did. The guilt trips got more intense. My dad called one evening alone this time. His voice sounded exhausted. Hazel, your mother can't sleep, he said heavily. Sophie cries every night. I don't know what to do. The image of my little sister crying made my chest ache, but I forced myself to stay firm. I'm sorry they're upset, I said, but that doesn't change my situation. We sacrificed so much to raise you both. My dad continued. I work extra hours to save for Sophie's college, and you can't even let her stay in your extra space. I don't have extra space, I said for what felt like the 100th time. It's one bedroom. Then she'll sleep on the couch, my dad said, frustration creeping back into his voice. She doesn't mind. But I mind, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. This is my home. Fine, my dad said, and his voice went ice cold. But don't expect us to be there when you need help someday. The threat was clear. If I didn't do what they wanted now, they'd abandon me when I needed them. Are you threatening me? I asked, shocked. I'm just stating facts, he replied. Family works both ways, Hazel. Remember that. And he hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my apartment, the phone still in my hand, feeling like the walls were closing in. They were using every tool they had. Guilt manipulation, public shaming, threats. All because I'd said no to something I had every right to refuse. And the worst part was that it was working. I was starting to doubt myself, starting to wonder if maybe I really was being selfish. Maybe I should just give in, make everyone happy, keep the peace. But then I looked around my apartment, at the couch I'd saved for, at the artwork I'd chosen, at the space I'd created for myself after years of having nothing that was truly mine. And I realized that giving in wouldn't make me happy. It would just teach my family that if they pushed hard enough, I'd always cave. So I made a decision. I was going to hold my ground, no matter what it cost me. The breaking point came exactly 1 week after that first video call. I'd been fielding phone calls and messages daily, each one more desperate or angry than the last. I'd stopped sleeping well. I'd catch myself staring at my phone, dreading the next notification. Work was suffering too. I'd zone out during meetings, my mind replaying conversations with my parents, searching for something I could have said differently. Then the email arrived. It was from my dad, sent at 11:30 on a Friday night. The subject line was simple: family decision. I opened it with shaking hands, somehow knowing this was going to be bad. "Dear Hazel," it began. Not honey, not sweetie. Just my name. "Your mother and I have discussed this situation thoroughly. We are deeply hurt by your refusal to help your sister." I kept reading, my eyes moving faster over the words. "We raised you to be kind and generous, but clearly those values didn't stick." The accusation felt like a slap. "Until you can reconsider your priorities, we think it's best we take some space from you. Don't call or visit until you're ready to do the right thing." The email ended without the usual sign-off. No love, no mom and dad. Just your parents. Like I was being formally disowned. I read it 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the message was clear. They were cutting me off. Unless I agreed to let Sophie live with me, I was no longer welcome in their lives. I sat there at my kitchen table, the light from my laptop screen, the only illumination in the dark apartment. I thought about calling them, trying one more time to explain. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Their minds were made up. The next few days were a blur of losses. My Aunt Carolyn unfriended me on Facebook. I only noticed because I went to check her page for something and found I couldn't access it anymore. My Uncle James blocked my number entirely. I discovered this when I tried to text him about something unrelated and got an error message. My cousins, people I'd grown up with, stopped responding to my messages. One by one, I was being cut off from the only family I'd ever known. Then my grandmother called. She was 81 years old, my mom's mother, and I'd always been close to her. "Hazel, dear," she said in her wavering voice. "I heard about what's happening with Sophie." I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Grandma would understand. Maybe she'd be on my side. But then she continued. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. You children are sisters. You should be taking care of each other." I tried to explain. "Grandma, I have my reasons. I need my own space." But she cut me off gently. "Whatever your reasons are, they can't be more important than family. I raised your mother to value family above everything. I'm very disappointed that you don't seem to share those values." Her disappointment hurt more than any of the angry calls had. This was the woman who'd baked me cookies every Sunday when I was little, who'd taught me to knit, who'd always made me feel special. And now even she thought I was wrong. My 27th birthday came in early May. Every year before this, my parents had called me at exactly 6 in the morning to sing happy birthday. It was a tradition that went back to my childhood. I'd wake up to their off-key singing, usually with Sophie's little voice joining in. This year, 6 o'clock came and went. No call, no text, no card in the mail, nothing. By noon, I'd checked my phone so many times the battery was running low. Still nothing. Then I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Sophie had posted a picture from a family barbecue. My parents were there, my aunt and uncle, my cousins, all gathered in our backyard back home, the same yard where we'd celebrated my birthday for years. The caption read, "Quality time with the people who actually care about family." I could see the date stamp. It was today, my birthday. They'd planned this gathering specifically to exclude me. I ordered pizza for one and sat alone in my apartment. My best friend Jessica came over later with cupcakes, bless her. She'd drawn little flowers on them with frosting. "I'm so sorry they're doing this to you," she said, wrapping me in a hug. I started crying. Then something I'd been holding back for weeks. "Maybe I am selfish," I sobbed into her shoulder. "Maybe I should just let Sophie stay." Jessica pulled back and looked me in the eye. "No," she said firmly. "You're not selfish. You're protecting your peace. That matters." "But it doesn't feel like it matters," I said. "It feels like I'm destroying my family over an apartment." "You're not destroying anything," Jessica insisted. They're the ones drawing lines in the sand. They're the ones making ultimatums. All you did was set a boundary. That's not selfish. That's healthy. But healthy didn't feel good. Healthy felt lonely, and painful, and wrong. I couldn't focus at work. My boss, Mr. Peterson, noticed during a team meeting. "Hazel, is everything okay?" he asked after everyone else had filed out. "Your performance has been a bit off lately. I wanted to keep it professional." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just some family stuff." He nodded slowly. "If you need to talk to HR about taking some personal time, that's always an option." I thanked him and left quickly, embarrassed that my personal problems were affecting my job. But one of my coworkers, Sarah, caught me at the elevator. I couldn't help but overhear she said quietly, "Want to grab coffee?" We went to the Starbucks on the first floor of our building. Over lattes, I found myself spilling the whole story to her. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My family did something similar to me 5 years ago. I set a boundary about lending money and they cut me off for a year." I looked at her in surprise. "Did things get better?" "Eventually," she said, "but only after I stopped apologizing for having boundaries. They needed to learn that I wasn't going to break just because they applied pressure. And once they realized that, once they understood I was serious, things slowly started to heal." Her words gave me a small spark of hope, but mostly I just felt exhausted. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept spinning through the same questions. Was I doing the right thing? Was keeping my apartment to myself really worth losing my entire family? I pulled out my phone and typed into Google, "Am I selfish for not letting my sister live with me?" The search results were mixed. Some Reddit threads said I was in the right. Others called people in similar situations entitled and ungrateful. I called my college friend Amy, who lived in California now. We'd been roommates sophomore year and stayed close. "Amy, I need an outside perspective," I said when she answered. I told her everything. When I finished, she sighed. "Hazel, remember freshman year? You had that roommate who never cleaned, never paid her share of groceries, took your stuff without asking," I remembered. "God, I'd hated that year. You gave and gave until you had nothing left." Amy continued. "You were miserable. You barely passed your classes that semester because you were so stressed. Do you remember why?" "Because I couldn't set boundaries," I said quietly. "Exactly," Amy said. "And now you're doing it again. You're considering giving up your peace, your space, your mental health because your family is pressuring you. Don't do it, Hazel. Don't make the same mistake twice." "But this is my sister," I protested weakly. "It's different." "Is it?" Amy challenged. "Because it sounds to me like she's being just as entitled as that roommate was. Just because you're related doesn't mean she has a right to your home." Her bluntness was exactly what I needed to hear. After we hung up, I felt slightly more certain. I wasn't going to give in, no matter how hard they pushed, no matter how isolated they made me feel. This was my line in the sand, and I was going to hold it. After 2 weeks of barely sleeping, I made an appointment with a therapist. I'd never been to therapy before, had always thought of it as something other people needed. But I was drowning, and I needed help staying afloat. Dr. Williams had kind eyes and a calm presence that immediately put me at ease. Her office was filled with plants and soft lighting. She gestured to a comfortable chair and asked me to tell her what brought me in. I told her everything. The whole story poured out in a rush: Sophie's acceptance to college, the assumption I'd house her, my refusal, the fallout. When I finished, I felt emotionally wrung out. Dr. Williams was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said something that shifted my entire perspective. "What I'm hearing is that your family expects you to sacrifice your well-being for their convenience. Not for Sophie's well-being necessarily. For their convenience. The financial convenience of not paying for housing." The distinction struck me hard. I'd been framing this as being about Sophie, about sisterly duty. But Dr. Williams was right. This was about my parents' finances. "Isn't that what family does, though?" I asked. "Sacrifice for each other." Dr. Williams tilted her head. "Sacrifice implies choice," she said gently. What they're doing is coercion. They're punishing you for not complying with their demands. That's not sacrifice, that's manipulation. She leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something. Has your family ever sacrificed for you in the way they're expecting you to sacrifice for Sophie? I opened my mouth to say yes, of course they had, but no words came out. I sat there thinking, when had they ever put my needs first? When had they ever given up something significant for my benefit? I couldn't think of a single example. Dr. Williams must have seen the realization dawning on my face. Let's explore this, she suggested. Tell me about your relationship with your family growing up. So I did. I told her about being 10 when Sophie was born, about essentially becoming a third parent, about working 3 jobs in college while my parents saved for Sophie's future, about my graduation that they missed for a dance recital. With each story, a pattern emerged that I'd never fully acknowledged before. Dr. Williams listened carefully, occasionally taking notes. When I paused, she said, "It sounds like you've been trained your entire life to put Sophie's needs before your own. And when you finally set a boundary, when you finally said your needs matter too, they couldn't handle it. Because the family system they'd built requires you to be the one who always gives in." I felt tears welling up. Is it wrong that I don't want to keep being that person? I whispered. Absolutely not, Dr. Williams said firmly. You have every right to prioritize your own well-being. That's not selfishness, that's self-preservation. She gave me homework for the next session. Write down a list of what you deserve in your own home, she instructed. Not what you'd be willing to settle for, what you truly deserve. It was harder than I expected. I'd spent so long minimizing my own needs that I'd forgotten what it felt like to believe I deserved anything at all. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook. At the top of the page, I wrote what I deserve in my own home. Then I started listing privacy after work, a quiet space to focus, freedom to decorate however I want, the ability to host friends without asking permission, a bedroom to myself, control over who has keys, peace of mind, knowing my belongings are safe. The list grew longer. The right to come home and recharge in silence, the freedom to work from home without interruptions, a space that feels like sanctuary, not obligation. I looked at what I'd written. None of these things seemed unreasonable. In fact, they seemed incredibly basic. These were things most people took for granted in their own homes. But my family was asking me to give up all of them. And for what? To save money they could technically afford to spend. Not because Sophie had no other options, but because free was better than affordable. I took a photo of the list and saved it to my phone. Whenever I started to doubt myself, I could look at it and remember. My second therapy session, Dr. Williams reviewed my list with me. These aren't luxuries, Hazel, she said. These are basic needs, and you have every right to protect them. But my family makes me feel like I'm being dramatic, I said. Like I'm making a big deal out of nothing. Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow. If it's nothing, then why do you feel so strongly about protecting it? Because it matters to me, I said. Because this apartment represents everything I've worked for. Exactly, Dr. Williams said. It matters. Your feelings are valid. Your needs are valid. And the fact that your family dismisses those feelings doesn't make them less real. We spent the rest of the session talking about how to maintain boundaries in the face of pressure. Dr. Williams introduced me to the concept of Jade, don't justify, argue, defend, or explain. You've made your decision, she said. You don't owe anyone a dissertation on why it's the right choice. No is a complete sentence. Meanwhile, my support system outside of family was becoming crucial. Jessica organized a girls' night at her apartment. She invited Sarah from work and set up a video call with Amy in California. The 4 of us sat around with wine and snacks, and Jessica brought up the elephant in the room. Okay, real talk time, she said. Hazel, what do you think would actually happen if Sophie moved in? I thought about it seriously. She's 17, I said slowly. She'd probably have friends over constantly. Sophie is very social. She'd want to host people, play music, stay up late. I work from home 2 days a week. I need quiet for client calls. And honestly, I need downtime to recharge. I'm an introvert. Having someone else always there would be exhausting. Amy jumped in from the screen. Would she pay rent? I blinked. I haven't even thought about that. My parents haven't mentioned money at all. Sarah leaned forward. So let me get this straight. You'd pay the mortgage, the utilities, buy the food, give up your privacy and peace all for free. When you put it like that, I said slowly, it sounds terrible. Because it is terrible, Jessica said bluntly. Your parents are treating your home like a free hotel for Sophie. They're not asking you to help. They're demanding you subsidize Sophie's entire living situation for 4 years. 4 years, I repeated. I hadn't thought about the full timeline. Sophie's college would be 4 years. Maybe 5 if she changed majors or studied abroad. That's potentially 5 years of your life, Amy said from the screen. 5 years of no privacy. 5 years of adjusting your life around a teenager's schedule. 5 years of feeling like a guest in your own home. And they're calling you selfish for saying no to that. The truth of it hit me hard. I'd been so focused on trying not to hurt anyone that I hadn't fully acknowledged how much they were asking of me. How much I'd be giving up. Not just space, but years. Years of my life that I'd never get back. You know what I think, Sarah said quietly. I think you're afraid that if you don't give in, you'll lose your family forever. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. But here's the thing, Sarah continued. If they're willing to cut you off over this, if they're willing to abandon you because you won't give up your entire life for their convenience, then what kind of family is that really? It was a question I didn't want to answer, but deep down, I already knew. 3 sessions with Dr. Williams had given me clarity and strength I hadn't felt in weeks. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to communicate my decision clearly, firmly, and without room for negotiation. No more explaining, no more justifying. Just a clear statement of my boundary and what I was willing to offer instead. I spent an evening crafting an email to my parents. I wrote it, deleted it, rewrote it a dozen times. Finally, I had something I felt good about. Dear Mom and Dad, I began. I've spent the past month reflecting on everything that's happened. I want to explain my decision clearly so there's no misunderstanding. My apartment is my home. I worked 3 jobs through college to afford an education when I was told the money needed to be saved for Sophie. I understood that, and I made it work without complaint. I've worked hard for 5 years since graduation to earn enough to buy this place. It's not just space, I continued. It's the result of years of sacrifice and effort. It represents my independence, my hard work, my future. When I was in college, I asked for help and was told you needed to save for Sophie's future. I respected that decision, even though it meant living in a cramped dorm and working myself to exhaustion. Now you're asking me to give up the peace and privacy I've earned essentially for free for 4 years minimum. That's not a small favor. That's asking me to fundamentally change my life and give up the sanctuary I've created. I love Sophie, I wrote, and I meant it. But my answer is still no. She cannot live in my apartment. I'm not making this decision lightly, and I'm not making it to hurt anyone. I'm making it because I know myself well enough to understand that this arrangement would breed resentment and damage our relationship permanently. However, I want to help in ways that work for everyone. I'm happy to research affordable housing options near campus. I can help Sophie apply for residence halls or look into shared apartments with roommates her age. I can even co-sign a lease if that would help. I took a breath and wrote the hard part. But she cannot live in my one-bedroom apartment. This is my final decision. I hope you can respect this boundary. I'm not asking for your approval, but I am asking for basic respect for my autonomy and my home. I signed it Love Hazel. Then I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response took 3 days. 3 agonizing days of checking my email, obsessively jumping every time my phone chimed. When the reply finally came, it was from my mom. Just her, not both of them. Hazel, we received your email. We've read it several times. We still don't agree with your decision, but we can see you've made up your mind. Sophie is very disappointed. We've started looking at dormitory options for her. However, I want you to understand that things between us won't go back to normal anytime soon. You've hurt this family deeply, and that's not something we can just forget. We need time and space to process this. The email was signed simply Mom. Not love, not yours, just Mom. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was acknowledgement. They were moving forward with other plans. That was something, at least. I sat there staring at the email, feeling a complex mix of relief and sadness. I'd won in a sense. I'd held my boundary. But the victory felt hollow when the cost was my family's affection. But I couldn't stop there. I'd made a commitment to help find alternatives, and I meant it. I spent the next 2 days researching every housing option near the University of Denver. I made a spreadsheet with costs, locations, and amenities. I called the admissions office to ask about last-minute housing availability. They were surprisingly helpful. There were still spots in several residence halls, they told me. Sophie would need to apply soon, but it was definitely possible. I compiled all this information into a detailed document and emailed it to my parents with a note. I know this is more expensive than having Sophie stay with me would have been. I'd like to contribute. I can pay the first month of her dorm fees as a graduation gift. It was $500, a significant chunk of my budget, but I wanted to show I was serious about helping, just in different ways than they'd demanded. My dad responded briefly, "We'll handle the costs ourselves, but thank you for the research." A week later, Sophie posted on Instagram a photo of a dorm room sparsely decorated, but clearly hers. The caption read, "New chapter starting. Room 314. My roommate Lily is from Iowa too. Small world." She didn't tag me, didn't mention me, but I could see the post through a mutual friend's story that reshared it. Sophie looked happy in the photo, genuinely excited, and despite everything, that made me feel a bit better. Then something unexpected happened. My Aunt Carolyn, who'd unfriended me weeks ago, sent me a Facebook message. I saw the notification and almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity won. I opened it. The message was short. "I heard you finally let your parents make other arrangements. About time. You really put them through unnecessary stress." I stared at the message, feeling my old defensiveness rising. But then I remembered Dr. Williams's advice. I didn't need to jade. I wrote back, "Aunt Carolyn, I appreciate your concern for my parents, but this was my decision to make about my own home. I've offered to help in other ways, and I have. I'm not discussing this further." I hit send, and then, feeling bold, I muted the conversation. She could reply if she wanted, but I wouldn't see it. I didn't need her approval. It was a small act of self-assertion, but it felt powerful. I was learning to protect my peace, not just in big ways, but in small daily choices too. The most surprising message came from my grandmother. She called one evening about a month after everything had started. "Hazel dear," she said when I answered, "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. I've been talking to some of my friends about what happened. One of them, her daughter had a similar situation years ago." I stayed quiet, unsure where this was going. And my friend helped me understand something. Grandma continued, "Sometimes you young people need your own space, your own lives. I was wrong to call you stubborn. You were just protecting something important to you." "Grandma?" I said, my voice breaking. "I'm so glad you understand." "I do," she said softly. "And I'm sorry for adding to your burden. You're a good girl, Hazel. You always have been." After we hung up, I cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. At least one person in my family understood. At least one person saw me as something other than selfish. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to help me believe I'd made the right choice. Summer passed into fall. Sophie started classes in late August. I watched her social media from a distance, not liking posts but checking in occasionally. She seemed to be thriving. Photos of her with Lily, her roommate, pictures from the dining hall with a group of friends, snapshots from football games and campus events. She looked genuinely happy. The kind of happy that comes from being fully immersed in college life, surrounded by peers experiencing independence for the first time. I realized something watching those posts. If Sophie had lived with me, she would have missed all of this. She wouldn't have bonded with Lily. She wouldn't have been hanging out in the dorm lounge at midnight with her floor mates. She wouldn't have had that authentic freshman experience. Living with me would have isolated her from the very thing that makes college special, the community. The realization eased some of my guilt. Maybe my no had actually been the best thing for her too, even if nobody had seen it that way at the time. Mid-September, my phone lit up with a text from Sophie. It was the first direct communication we'd had in months. The message was short. Hey, dorm life is actually pretty fun. I have a lot of friends on my floor. We stay up late talking and someone's always ordering pizza. I think I would have missed out on this if I lived with you. I stared at the message, reading it over and over. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, an admission that maybe, just maybe, I'd been right. I texted back, I'm really happy for you, Soph. It sounds like you're having the college experience you deserve. Her response came quickly. Yeah, it's good. Thanks for the research you did on housing. It actually helped. And thanks for paying that first month. Mom told me you did that. It was brief, stilted. We weren't back to normal. But it was a crack in the wall between us. A tiny opening where light could get through. I'd take it. October brought Sophie's 18th birthday. I sent her a care package, some of her favorite snacks, a cozy blanket for her dorm room, a gift card to the campus bookstore. I didn't expect a thank you, but she texted me a photo of herself wrapped in the blanket with a simple, "This is perfect. Thank you." Small steps. We were taking small steps toward each other, slowly rebuilding what had been damaged. Then came the call I'd been waiting for but dreading. It was from my mom, and when I saw her name on my screen one evening in late October, my stomach clenched. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Hello," I said carefully. "Hazel." My mom's voice was tentative. "We're having a small party for Sophie when she comes home for Thanksgiving. Just family. Do you want to come?" The invitation hung in the air. I thought about saying no, about protecting myself from potential awkwardness and tension. But I also thought about Dr. Williams's words. Boundaries aren't walls. They're gates. You get to choose when to open them. "Okay," I said. "I'd like that." There was audible relief in my mom's voice. "Good. We'd like that too. We'll see you then." Thanksgiving was exactly as awkward as I'd expected. I arrived at my parents' house with a pumpkin pie I'd made from scratch, a peace offering of sorts. Sophie answered the door. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then she stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing, familiar scents that made my chest ache with nostalgia. My parents were in the kitchen. My dad looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "Hazel," he said, nodding. "Glad you could make it." It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. My mom came over and hugged me briefly. "How have you been?" she asked, and I could tell she was genuinely asking, not just making small talk. "Busy," I said. "Work has been intense." She nodded and handed me a dish to carry to the dining room. Just like that, we fell into old patterns, setting the table, arranging food, making small talk about safe topics. Sophie told stories about her classes, about Lily, about the campus. My parents asked questions, engaged, proud. I stayed mostly quiet, just listening, watching my family interact. I noticed things I hadn't seen before. The way my mom's hand lingered on Sophie's shoulder when she passed behind her chair. The way my dad's eyes softened when Sophie laughed at his jokes. They loved her so much. And I understood that their pushing about the apartment had come from a place of love, even if it had been misguided and hurtful. They wanted to protect her, provide for her, make her path easier. But I also realized that their love for Sophie didn't have to come at the expense of my well-being. These things weren't mutually exclusive. As dinner wound down and we were clearing plates, my dad pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Hazel," he said quietly, "your mother and I have been talking. We understand better now why you said no." He paused, struggling for words. "We pushed too hard. We made assumptions. I'm sorry for that. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't address everything that had been said and done, but it was something. "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate that." We stood there in silence for a moment, the dishwasher humming between us. Then my dad asked about my job and we talked about safe, normal things. By the time I left that evening, things weren't perfect, but they were better. Healing had begun slow and tentative, but real. The months following Thanksgiving brought gradual improvement in my family relationships. My mom started calling occasionally just to chat. Nothing deep, nothing addressing the elephant in the room. But she'd tell me about her students, ask about my work. Small normalcies that felt like olive branches. My dad would text me articles he thought I'd find interesting, usually about marketing or business. I'd respond with thanks, and we'd have brief exchanges. We were rebuilding brick by cautious brick. Sophie and I texted more regularly. She'd send me memes sometimes or ask my advice about random things. How do I get red wine out of a carpet? What's a good birthday gift for a roommate? Nothing heavy, nothing about what had happened. But the frequency of contact increased, and that felt significant. By winter break, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee when she was home. We met at a Starbucks halfway between my apartment and my parents' house. Sitting across from her, watching her doctor a latte with excessive vanilla syrup, I was struck by how much older she looked. Just a few months of college had matured her. There was a confidence in the way she carried herself that hadn't been there before. "So how's it really going?" I asked. She smiled. "Really good, actually. I mean, classes are hard. But I joined this club for environmental science majors. And Lily is basically my best friend now. We're already planning to room together next year." "I'm really happy for you," I said and meant it. Sophie stirred her latte, not meeting my eyes. "Look, I know I was a brat about the whole apartment thing. I didn't get why you said no. I just felt rejected." I took a breath. "I never wanted to reject you, Sophie. I just needed to protect my space. My home. Can you understand that now?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah. Living in the dorm has been so good for me. I wouldn't have made all these friends if I'd been living with you. I would have just hung out with you instead of putting myself out there." We talked for over an hour, clearing the air in ways we couldn't have done months ago. Sophie apologized for the Instagram posts for calling me selfish. I apologized for not explaining better at the time, for letting her feel rejected when that wasn't my intent. We didn't hug when we left. We weren't quite there yet. But we smiled at each other, real smiles, and that was enough. A year passed. Sophie finished her freshman year with good grades and announced she'd be staying in Denver for the summer, working an internship and living in an off-campus apartment with Lily and two other friends. My parents visited her a few times, and during one of those visits, they stopped by my apartment. It was the first time they'd seen my space since I'd bought it. My mom walked through, slowly taking everything in. "This is lovely, Hazel," she said softly. "You've made a real home here." My dad stood by the window looking out at the city view. "I can see why you wanted to keep this to yourself," he said. "It's peaceful." We had coffee at my small dining table, the three of us, and talked about normal things. Sophie's summer plans, my latest project at work, Mom's new position as department head at her school. It felt almost normal, almost like a family again. Before they left, my mom hugged me at the door. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "for knowing what you needed and standing by it. That takes strength." I lived alone in my apartment, just as I'd wanted, just as I'd fought for. Some evenings I'd sit on my couch in the quiet, working on my laptop or reading a book, and feel overwhelming gratitude. This space was still mine, my sanctuary, my achievement. I'd protected it when everyone told me I shouldn't, and in doing so, I'd learned something invaluable about my own worth. Dr. Williams and I still met monthly. Our sessions had shifted from crisis management to personal growth. She'd helped me see patterns in my life I'd never noticed before. The way I'd always prioritized others' comfort over my own well-being. The way I'd equated self-sacrifice with virtue. She taught me that boundaries weren't selfish, they were necessary. That saying no wasn't mean, it was honest. And that protecting my peace wasn't optional, it was essential. Looking back now, sitting in my apartment on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I can see the full arc of what happened. My family had tested me, pushed me, tried to bend me to their will. And when I didn't bend, when I stood firm, they'd cut me off. It had hurt. It still hurts sometimes. But it had also taught me that I was stronger than I'd known. That I could withstand pressure and come out intact on the other side. That my worth wasn't dependent on their approval. Sophie came over sometimes now, usually on Saturday afternoons. We'd watch movies or cook together. She never stayed the night. She understood without me having to say it that this was my space, and I valued my solitude. And the fact that she respected that boundary made our relationship better, not worse. We were learning to be adult siblings, not a caretaker and a child. Equals who chose to spend time together because we wanted to, not because we were obligated to. My parents and I would never have the close relationship we'd had before all this happened. Too much had been said, too much hurt had been caused. But we'd found a new equilibrium, one where I was allowed to have boundaries and they were learning to respect them. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that honesty hard won, as it was felt more valuable than the false peace I'd have had if I'd simply given in. I realized that my family's reaction had taught me more than I'd expected. They'd taught me that boundaries are only respected when you enforce them consistently. That no is a complete sentence. I didn't need to justify or explain or defend my decisions to death. I could simply state what I needed and hold that line. And I learned that sometimes the people who love you will test your limits the hardest. Not because they're malicious, but because they're used to you giving in. They expect compliance because that's the pattern you've established over years. Setting that boundary about my apartment was the hardest thing I'd done in my adult life. Harder than working 3 jobs in college, harder than buying this place, because it meant risking something I valued deeply, my family's love and acceptance. But it was also the most necessary thing I'd ever done. Because if I couldn't stand up for my own peace in my own home, where could I stand up for it? If I couldn't protect the space I'd worked so hard to create, what else would I let others take from me? My apartment isn't just 4 walls and a door. It's not just 650 square feet of hardwood floors and freshly painted walls. It's proof that I can build something for myself and protect it. It's evidence that my needs matter just as much as anyone else's. It's a daily reminder that I have worth beyond what I can provide for others. Every morning when I wake up in my own bedroom, in my own bed, in my quiet, peaceful space, I remember that I chose myself. And that choice, controversial as it was, saved me. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm stronger now, more certain of my own value. I've learned to listen to my gut instinct about what I need, rather than dismissing it in favor of what others want from me. I've learned that disappointing people is sometimes necessary, that you can't please everyone, and trying to do so will only destroy you. I've learned that family is important, but so am I. These lessons came at a cost, but they were worth every uncomfortable conversation, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. If you're facing pressure to sacrifice your boundaries for family convenience, remember this. Your peace matters just as much as anyone else's. Your needs are valid. Your right to your own space, your own life, your own choices is not up for debate. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who knows their worth. Someone who understands that self-care isn't selfish, it's survival. Someone who recognizes that you can't pour from an empty cup, and maintaining your boundaries is how you keep that cup filled. Setting boundaries will be uncomfortable. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will be upset. They'll call you selfish, difficult, ungrateful. They'll pressure you, guilt trip you, try every manipulation tactic they know. But if you can hold firm, if you can weather that storm, you'll come out the other side stronger and more grounded in who you are. And eventually, if the relationship is meant to survive, the other people will adjust. They'll learn that you mean what you say. They'll start to respect your boundaries because they realize you won't compromise them. My story isn't about being estranged from family. It's about the journey to self-respect, about learning that love doesn't require sacrifice of your fundamental needs, about understanding that healthy relationships have room for boundaries, and relationships that can't survive boundaries weren't healthy to begin with. It's about choosing yourself without guilt, protecting your peace without apology, and building a life that serves your well being first. Because you matter. Your comfort matters. Your home, your sanctuary, your hard won independence matters. And anyone who truly loves you will eventually understand that. So here I am in my 650 square foot apartment, living alone just like I wanted. Working from home in peace, hosting friends when I choose, decorating exactly how I like. Going to bed each night in my own room, waking up each morning in my own space, and feeling for the first time in my life like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not because it's perfect, but because it's mine. Because I fought for it. Because I didn't let anyone, not even family, take it away from me. And that's something to be proud of. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? Did you face backlash for protecting your own space or needs? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps others who might need to hear this message find it. And subscribe to this channel for more real stories about family dynamics, boundaries, and finding your strength in difficult situations. Share this video with someone who might need the reminder that their boundaries matter. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it brought you some clarity or comfort wherever you are in your own journey. Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Take care of yourselves, protect your peace, and never apologize for knowing your worth. Until next time.